Rain clung to me like guilt. I stepped into the Verhoeven Tower dripping through my sleeves, the kind of wet that seeps under your skin and makes even breathing sound like apology. The lobby smelled of polished stone and new money. People moved through it without hurry, their heels clicking like punctuation in a language I never learned. The guard behind the counter didn't bother to hide his boredom. Name? Peter Novak. South District Relief Center. He pressed a button, buzzed me through, already forgetting I existed. The elevator mirrors gave me back a stranger, rumpled jacket, damp collar, eyes too tired for 33. I'd shaved that morning, but the reflection didn't believe me. Everyone who came here glowed. I looked like a shadow that had lost its owner. My palms kept sweating. It wasn't fear of her exactly, more the fear of being invisible again. I told myself I wasn't here to beg. Not this time. Begging had teeth. I'd worn them down years ago. Today I carried only one word in my pocket. Asterisk thank you. Asterisk it felt small, like a stone I'd been polishing too long. When the doors slid open, silence met me first, thick, careful silence. The 12th floor gleamed white and silver, the kind of place where dust probably needed permission to settle. My shoes left wet ghosts on the carpet. The receptionist, red nails, expression like tempered glass, looked up just long enough to measure my worth and find it lacking. Appointment? She asked. Sort of, I said. Susie Verhoeven asked to see someone from our center. A lie, small but necessary. She gestured toward the far hallway. End of the corridor. The name on the door was carved in gold. Susie Verhoeven, C.O. I hesitated. What was I doing here? Bringing street rain into a room built for gods. My throat felt tight. But my mother's face flashed before me, her last smile in that rebuilt clinic, the smell of disinfectant and cheap hope, and I knew leaving would be worse than failing. I knocked. Come in, a voice said, cool, trained, unhurried. She sat behind a desk that could double as an altar, sunlight glancing off its edges. Susie Verhoeven was exactly as the magazines described, beauty pressed into precision. Not a strand of hair out of place, not a hint of warmth where it wasn't required. You're from the relief center? She asked, her tone balanced between politeness and dismissal. Yes. I came to thank you. Her eyes flicked up, puzzled. To thank me? For the clinic, I said. Your donation rebuilt it. You saved lives there. For a breath, nothing moved. Then her hand, the one holding the pen, trembled just enough for the light to catch it. No one's ever said that to me, she murmured. I managed a thin smile. Maybe no one thought you'd want to hear it. Outside, the rain pressed its palms to the glass, whispering the truth neither of us could yet name. Inside, something small and human cracked open in the air between us. Her silence lasted long enough for me to hear the clock ticking somewhere behind her desk. It wasn't loud, but in that immaculate room, even a heartbeat would have sounded out of place. Susie Verhoeven leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on me with a kind of practiced calm that could freeze oceans. She wasn't used to surprise. People probably rehearsed what they said to her, made sure every word sparkled before it reached her ear. I hadn't rehearsed enough. You came to thank me, she repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of the words. That's unusual. I nodded, trying to steady my voice. Most people don't thank donors, I guess. But I needed to. Her lips curved, not a smile, more like muscle memory. You think gratitude is rare in my world? No, I said. I think it's outsourced. Something flickered in her eyes, gone before I could name it. She looked down at the papers on her desk, though I could tell she wasn't reading them anymore. I took a breath. My mother died in that clinic you rebuilt. Heart failure. She didn't make it, but others did. Kids, old folks, people who didn't even know your name. I just thought you should know the place is alive again. For a moment, the air changed. Her shoulders lowered slightly, as if something inside her had unclenched. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. I sign hundreds of checks every year. Hospitals, shelters, schools. It all blurs together after a while. I've never met anyone who... She trailed off, eyes drifting toward the window. Who made it real? I offered. Her gaze returned to mine. Yes, that. I noticed then that she wasn't wearing a ring. The tabloids liked to say she was married to her empire, but now she looked more like its prisoner. There was tiredness beneath her beauty, the kind that money can't hide, loneliness polished into elegance. She rose from her chair and walked to the window. The city stretched beneath her, glass and fog and money pretending to be power. Do you know how strange it is, she said, to work every day in the name of compassion and still feel completely untouched by it? I didn't answer. I didn't know how. She turned toward me, arms crossed, guarding herself again. Why are you really here, Peter? Gratitude is nice, but no one crosses half the city in the rain just to deliver it in person. Her question hit harder than she knew. Maybe because I didn't have an easy answer. Because I wanted to see the face behind the signature, I said finally. Because I needed to know if the woman who saved 100 strangers still believed in what she was doing. Her breath caught, barely audible, and for the first time, she looked unsure. And? What do you see? I studied her, the sharp lines, the poise, the distance she wore like armor. Someone who gives everything except herself. For a second, I thought I'd gone too far. Her eyes darkened, the seal mask snapping back into place. But then, almost imperceptibly, her expression softened. You don't know me, she said. No, I said, but I'd like to. She looked at me for a long, quiet moment before sitting down again. Most people want my approval, not my story, she said. Maybe that's the problem. I murmured. A sound escaped her, half laugh, half sigh. She reached for the intercom, then hesitated. Do you drink coffee, Mr. Novak? I blinked. Yes. Then stay, she said. You've already ruined my schedule. We might as well waste more time together. Her tone was dry, but her eyes weren't. Somewhere beneath the chill, I caught the first shimmer of warmth, fragile, uncertain, like morning light sneaking through frost. She poured the coffee herself. I noticed her hands weren't as steady as her reputation. The steam drifted between us, softening the room's sharp edges. For the first time since I'd walked in, I felt like I could breathe. Susie sat across from me, her back straight but her expression quieter, as if she'd forgotten to wear her armor. So, she said, tell me about this clinic I apparently rebuilt. I smiled faintly. It used to be a church, burned down during the winter riots. For years, it stood empty. Just 4 walls and a cross eaten by rust. Kids played there until one fell through the floorboards. After that, no one went inside. Her eyes stayed on me, unreadable. And then? Then your donation came. We didn't even know it was yours at first. One morning, trucks arrived with bricks and wood and a sign that said *Verhoeven Foundation. We thought it was a mistake. She gave a dry little laugh. Most of my father's accountants probably thought so too. I nodded. Maybe. But that mistake turned into a place where people stopped dying alone. We call it the House of Air, because the windows never quite fit, and you can always hear the wind singing through them. Her eyes softened. That's beautiful. It's real, I said. Real's better than beautiful. Something in her face changed, like I'd touched a nerve she didn't know was still exposed. She looked away, tracing the rim of her cup. You speak about that place as if it's holy. To us it is. A quiet fell between us. Outside, the rain had stopped, but droplets still trembled down the glass like they hadn't gotten the memo. She spoke again, barely above a whisper. When I was younger, my father made me visit every factory he owned. He said I had to understand where our money came from. I remember the noise, the heat, the smell of oil. I cried once. He told me to grow up. There was no bitterness in her voice, only the exhaustion of someone who had carried a lesson too heavy for too long. I think you did, I said softly. But maybe you grew up in the wrong direction. That made her laugh, quiet, genuine, fragile. You're the first person to say that to me. I shrugged. Most people probably like your direction. They like what it buys them. She sighed. Sometimes I wonder if I've ever given anything real. Checks, yes. Buildings, yes. But asterisk me? Asterisk, I don't know. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You gave hope to people who'd forgotten what it looked like. That's real enough. Her gaze found mine again, and there was something raw in it now, something human. You speak like a man who's lost a lot. I have, I admitted. But losing teaches you how to see what's worth keeping. The clock ticked once, loud in the silence. She exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath for years. You should come back, she said suddenly. Tell me more about the people there. I want to know what happened after the ink dried. I hesitated, then nodded. If you really want to know, I will. I do, she said. For the first time, I think I really do. When I left her office, the city light had shifted, less gray, more gold. Maybe it was just the weather. Or maybe, somewhere behind those glass walls, Susie Verhoeven had finally remembered what warmth felt like. 3 days passed before she called. Her assistant's voice was smooth and polite, but the message behind it wasn't. Asterisk, Ms. Verhoeven would like to see you again. This afternoon, if possible. Asterisk. Possible. As if I ever said no to a miracle. By the time I reached her office, the rain had returned. The sky looked like an unmade bed, gray, tangled, restless. I stood at her door, dripping again, wondering if she'd noticed that I still wore the same jacket. She did. The corner of her mouth lifted. You own only one coat, don't you? 2, I said. This one and the imaginary one that doesn't leak. For a heartbeat, she laughed, a sound that didn't belong in a room like this. It startled her too. She gestured toward the small seating area by the window. Come. Sit. I don't want to talk about donations today. Good, I said. Neither do I. Her assistant brought coffee, but we didn't touch it. The city below was smudged with rain, lights blurring into one long sigh. She asked about the clinic, about the people there. I told her about Marta, the nurse who worked 12-hour shifts with a smile that could restart a tired heart, and old Mr. Ruiz, who sang lullabies to the patients at night because he couldn't sleep himself. She listened like the world outside didn't exist. Every now and then she asked something small, what the walls smelled like after the rain, what color the bedsheets were, how loud the children's laughter sounded. Strange questions from a woman who had built empires out of silence. At one point, she stood and walked to the window. Her reflection stared back. Perfect posture, perfect dress, eyes that looked too heavy for her face. You make it sound like another planet, she said. Maybe it is, I answered. People there don't have much, but they share what they do. That's its own kind of wealth. She turned to me, her voice soft. I wouldn't know. My world's built on keeping, not sharing. For a moment, I saw the loneliness under her elegance, the kind that comes from being admired but never really known. I wanted to say something gentle, but the words caught in my throat. She saved me the trouble. I'd like to see it, she said suddenly. The clinic? Yes. I want to see what you see when you talk about it. It wasn't a request. It was a confession dressed as command. You sure? I asked. It's not exactly your kind of place. Her eyes narrowed, but not with offense. Maybe that's the point. We sat there in the quiet hum of her office, two people from different planets orbiting the same question. Asterisk, what happens when a wall finally cracks? Asterisk. Before I left, she handed me her card. Call me when it's a good day to visit. I don't like cameras or fanfare. I didn't take you for someone who liked either, I said. Her smile came slow, uncertain, the kind you don't give away often. You're not what I expected, Piter. Good, I replied. Expectations ruin better things. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment she'd said I'd like to see it, not because it was surprising, but because of how she said it. There was hunger in her voice, the quiet kind, the kind that has nothing to do with food and everything to do with wanting to feel alive again. And I realized something strange. The woman who had rebuilt half the city with her money didn't need another building. She needed to rebuild herself. She arrived 3 days later, unannounced, in a car so black it swallowed the light around it. Even the children outside the clinic stopped playing and just stared. None of us had seen a vehicle that clean on our street. When Susie stepped out, she looked impossibly out of place. Her long coat brushed against puddles that had never met anything so expensive. Her perfume fought with the smell of diesel and damp earth. For a second, she froze, heels sinking slightly into the mud, eyes scanning the narrow alley, the cracked windows, the walls breathing out decades of dust. "You're sure this is it?" she asked, half whisper, half disbelief. "This is the heart of it," I said. Something in her expression shifted. Maybe shock? Maybe awe? The driver tried to follow her, but she waved him off. Then, gathering her courage, she stepped inside. The clinic was alive in its imperfect way. The ceiling leaked in one corner, a child's drawing covered the plaster with bright sunbursts, and the smell of soup drifted from the kitchen. Marta, the nurse, looked up and froze mid-stir. "That's her," I said softly. Marta's eyes widened. She wiped her hands on her apron and smiled. "Then I guess I owe you my job, ma'am." Susie smiled back, awkward and genuine. "No, you don't owe me anything," she said. "I think I owe all of you." She spent hours walking through the rooms. She talked to the children, asked their names, bent to listen when an old man with trembling hands told her his leg didn't hurt anymore. And when she reached the small memorial wall, the one with photos of those we'd lost before the clinic reopened, she stopped. Her gloved fingers hovered over one picture. "That's my mother," I said quietly. Susie turned toward me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "She looks kind." "She was," I said. "She used to say healing isn't about medicine, it's about being seen." For a moment, neither of us spoke. There was too much in the air, grief, gratitude, and something unnamed pulsing between them. Outside, the wind picked up. The old tin roof groaned like an old man stretching his bones. Susie tilted her head, listening. "It sounds alive," she murmured. "It is. It breathes with everyone who walks through." When she smiled, it wasn't the polished one from magazines. It was uneven, almost shy, and it hit me harder than I expected. She looked younger then, like she'd set down the invisible weight she'd carried for too long. Before leaving, she turned to me. "There's something wrong with this world," she said. "I've lived above it for so long, I almost forgot what it costs to stay warm down here." I met her gaze. "Maybe now you remember." Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something else, but instead, she slipped a folded envelope into my hand. "For repairs," she said. And no, it's not charity. Call it a continuation. She stepped back, coat swirling in the cold wind. The children ran after her car until it turned the corner. When the street quieted, I opened the envelope. Inside was a check, yes, but beneath it, a handwritten note in elegant cursive. Asterisk, you were right. The clinic may be yours, but the heart, it's mine now too. Asterisk. I didn't understand what she meant then. Not fully. But that night, lying awake under the faint hum of the clinic's old lights, I realized something had changed. The woman who'd come to give had started to feel. And the man who came to thank her had started to care too much for his own good. After that day, she kept coming back. At first, once a week, then twice. Always unannounced, always without the polished entourage that used to orbit her like moons. The first few times, people stared the way you stare at a miracle you do not trust. Then, they started waving, calling her Miss Susie like she'd always been one of us. She swept floors once. Clumsy, but determined. Her manicured fingers blistered after an afternoon of sorting medicine boxes. Marta tried to stop her, but Susie just laughed, the sound bright and unfamiliar. I've never worked for something that didn't end in a press release, she said. Feels good to sweat for once. I found myself watching her too much. The way she tied her hair back with a rubber band from her wrist, how she squinted when reading faded labels, how she smiled without checking who was looking. The ice queen had melted, but what she revealed underneath wasn't fragility, it was fire. One afternoon, after the clinic closed, we sat outside on the concrete steps, sharing a thermos of bad coffee that tasted like smoke and salt. The streetlights flickered, painting her face in gold and shadow. She looked tired, but softer. You know what's strange? She said. Every time I leave here, I feel cleaner. But the moment I go back to my office, it's like the air turns thick again. Maybe it's the altitude, I said lightly. She smiled, shaking her head. It's the lies. Everything up there runs on them, numbers dressed as compassion, promises that rot the second they're signed. I used to think I could fix it from the top. Now I'm not sure the top even remembers there's a bottom. Her honesty hit me like a confession not meant to escape the cathedral of her throat. I wanted to reach out, to tell her she didn't have to fix the whole world, just not to stop caring. But I stayed quiet. The distance between us was made of more than air. The next day, her visits stopped. A week passed. Then two. The clinic felt emptier, as if she'd taken the light with her. I told myself she was busy, that billionaires don't owe explanations to men who patch roofs with borrowed nails. But when the news came, I understood. It started as a whisper, a financial scandal, an internal leak, accusations of misuse of funds. Her name flashed across the television in the waiting room, followed by words like fraud and asterisk embezzlement. Asterisk, I knew immediately it wasn't true. She was too proud, too exacting, too painfully honest for corruption. Still, the headlines didn't care. They loved tearing down what they once worshipped. By the third day, her face had become a public spectacle. I tried calling. No answer. Texts went unread. Then, one night, just as I was locking the clinic, a car stopped at the curb. The door opened, and she stepped out. No chauffeur, no armor, just Susie, her eyes red, her hair undone, her voice trembling. They're destroying me, she whispered. I caught her before she could fall. Her body shook with quiet fury. I didn't do what they're saying, Piter. But it doesn't matter, does it? Truth doesn't trend. I led her inside. The clinic lights were dim, humming softly. She sat on one of the beds, clutching her coat around her like a shield. My board's cutting me out. My so-called friends aren't returning calls. It's like I vanished overnight. I knelt beside her, unsure if she needed comfort or a witness. "You haven't vanished," I said. "You just landed somewhere real for the first time." Her eyes met mine, wet, defiant, alive. "Then maybe this is where I was supposed to be all along." The way she said it made my pulse stumble. Because in that moment, I didn't just see a woman betrayed by her world. I saw someone finally breaking free from it. And I realized, with something close to terror, that I wasn't just her ally anymore. I was falling for her. The morning after she came to me, the city woke up hungover on headlines. Every screen, every paper, every gossip site screamed her name. Asterisk Verhoeven Empire under investigation. Asterisk asterisk the philanthropist with a dark secret. Asterisk they called her a liar, a manipulator, a woman who built her empire on sympathy and deceit. I stood behind the clinic counter, watching her face flicker across the old TV. Even pixelated, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She wasn't the ice queen anymore. She looked hunted. Marta turned down the volume. "You think it's true?" "No," I said too fast. "I know it's not." But knowing wasn't enough. Truth doesn't shout as loud as scandal. That night, when the city had gone to sleep and only the clinic's humming lights kept vigil, she came again. No car this time. No makeup. No disguise. Just a woman who had lost everything except the strength to keep standing. I opened the door before she could knock. She stood there, soaked by the drizzle, her eyes rimmed red but dry. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. "You came to the right place." She walked in, shaking slightly, hands buried in her coat pockets like she was hiding the last of her dignity there. I brewed her coffee, though she didn't touch it. She just sat at the table, staring at the steam curling toward the ceiling. "They found forged documents under my name," she said finally. "Transfers I never made, fake accounts. Someone's framing me, Piter. And the worst part? I know who." She looked up then, and her eyes burned with a cold kind of rage. "My father's oldest partner, Paul Ridley. He's been using my foundation to launder money for years. When I found out, I threatened to expose him. Now he's burning me first." The words hung between us, heavy and dangerous. I'd heard the name before. Ridley was untouchable. The kind of man whose smile could buy silence. "You can't fight him alone," I said. Her laugh was bitter. "Everyone around me already chose a side." "You think anyone's going to believe me over a man with half the city in his pocket?" "I would." She froze. It wasn't the words, it was the way I said them, as if believing in her was the most natural thing I'd ever done. And maybe it was. We spent the night going through documents she'd hidden in her phone, emails, statements, photos. Proof. Enough to clear her name, maybe even destroy his. But we both knew proof meant nothing if the world refused to see it. At dawn, exhaustion finally caught up to her. She fell asleep in the old reclining chair in my office, the one that squeaked whenever you moved. I covered her with my jacket. She looked fragile and fierce all at once, like glass hiding a storm. When the sun rose, the city outside glittered with deceit. But inside the clinic, the light found her face and made it human again. I watched her breathe, slow and even, and I thought about everything she'd lost: power, reputation, control, and everything she'd found here, among the broken and forgotten. And somewhere deep in my chest, something dangerous took root. Not pity. Not admiration. Something warmer, sharper, harder to escape. When she woke, I handed her coffee. "You can't go back to your penthouse," I said. "They'll be watching." She looked at me carefully. "Then where do I go?" "Here," I said. "Until we fix this." A faint smile ghosted across her lips. "You're risking everything, Piter." I shrugged. I don't have much to risk. But that wasn't true anymore. Because somewhere between the ashes of her world and the quiet of mine, she'd become the one thing I couldn't afford to lose. And as I watched the first rays of light catch in her hair, I realized, if Ridley wanted war, he'd just declared it in the wrong man's house. The next few days blurred into one long heartbeat. Susie stayed in the small room behind the clinic, the one we usually kept for patients who had nowhere else to go. She slept little, ate less, and spent most of her time bent over her laptop, eyes burning in the dim light. I'd never seen her like that, stripped of polish, fighting like a cornered animal who just remembered her claws. Together, we pieced the story back to life. Hidden accounts, coded emails, false ledgers. Every file she opened was another crack in Ridley's empire. I helped where I could, printing, cross-checking, bringing coffee that she never finished. Sometimes she'd look up from the screen and smile at me, tired, grateful, too human for a woman the world called untouchable. One night, the power flickered and went out. We sat in candlelight, surrounded by stacks of papers that looked like confessions. The silence stretched until she whispered, "You should hate me, you know." "For what?" "For being blind this long. For living so high above everyone that I couldn't see the rot under my own feet." I shook my head. "You saw it. That's what matters. Most people never do." Her eyes glistened in the flicker. "You saved me, Peter." "No," I said quietly. "You saved yourself. I just opened the door." The following morning, she disappeared before sunrise. No note, no message. I thought she'd run. My chest ached with a weight I didn't want to name. Then, by noon, the news broke again, this time different. Asterisk exclusive. Verhoeven Foundation chairwoman exposes money laundering network. Asterisk. Her face filled the screen, live from a press conference. Her voice was steady, steel-wrapped in calm. She named names, showed documents, revealed everything we'd worked on. Ridley was there too, in the footage, being escorted out by police, his smirk finally gone. I stood frozen, pride and terror colliding in my veins. She'd done it. But she'd done it alone. That night, the clinic was quieter than usual. I was closing up when headlights swept across the wall. Her car stopped outside, the door opened, and there she was, wind-tossed, pale, alive. She stepped close before I could speak. "It's over," she said. "I'm free." I looked at her, at the relief trembling just beneath her smile. "And now?" She reached into her coat and handed me a folder. Inside were deeds, signed and stamped. Asterisk the Verhoeven Center for Community Medicine. Asterisk the clinic in my name. "I can't run it," she said. "But you can." "It's yours now." I stared at the paper like it was something holy. "Susie, this is a gift," she interrupted softly. "The only one that ever meant anything." The streetlight caught the wet shimmer in her eyes. She laughed, shaky but real. "You came to thank me, remember? But I think it's me who owes everything to you." I wanted to tell her that gratitude didn't belong to either of us anymore, that what we'd built together had already gone beyond words. Instead, I stepped closer. The rain began again, slow and delicate, tracing silver lines down her face. She didn't move when I reached for her hand. The city around us hummed its usual indifferent song, but for that small, stolen moment, it felt like the world had paused just long enough for two broken lives to find the same rhythm. And in that quiet, between thunder and breath, I finally understood what she'd truly given me. Not money. Not a building. But the one thing I thought I'd lost forever. A reason to believe in people again.